Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the Switcheroo seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which after each player has taken their turn, we will switch hands. And today we are playing an absolutely insane deck that I can't believe works, but somehow I was undefeated with it. So let's go give it a look. So today we'll be playing a Northern Realms Pincer maneuver deck that focuses on getting as much value as possible out of what would normally be very weak cards. And because our opponent is going to have our hand half of the time, they're not going to get much value out of those cards at all, but we will. How do we make that happen? Well, it is all based on the Mutagenerator card, because if we play this, even with a 4 or 5 provision cost unit that doesn't have a lot of value, we can either play it in the range row and boost all the other cards with the same provision cost in our deck, giving us some carryover, or we can play those cards in the melee row and boost all the other cards on the board that have that same provision cost. So what we'll do is play this Mutagenerator on turn 1 in round 1, and then start off by playing our units in the range row to give ourselves some deck boosts, and then we have a bunch of cards that can summon themselves out from our deck, and once they've already gotten some deck boosts, that's going to be worth a lot of additional value. And in addition to that, we will have Erland in round 2/3, who will absorb whatever boosts we have remaining in our deck and apply them all to himself, giving us a nice high tempo play for a shorter round 2 or round 3. So the cards that we are really looking at here in round 1 are things like the Blue Stripes Commando, because we can play one on the board and then some of the other one out from our deck, and if that one has gotten some deck boosting, then that's great. And then similar story with cards like the Dunbanner as well. We can even use things like the Blue Striped Scout to create copies of those cards in our deck so we can summon even more of them out. And if we're feeling really ambitious, even do things like Teleportation to replay those Blue Striped Scouts to create even more copies of those cards in our deck to get even more out. And that's the basic idea. Then, slightly different idea here with the Cintrian Royal Guard, because although we can't summon them out from our deck, if we can create additional copies of them on the board, then they become more valuable there. So that means doing things like, say, using Queen Adalia to create additional copies of them might be beneficial in that case. And then outside of that, we also have other cards like Knickers that can get summoned out from our deck, as well as Roach, and the Wolf School Trio as well. So basically just tons of stuff that gets summoned out from our deck. And then in order to give us a little more consistency to get that Mutagenerator in our hand, we obviously have our leader ability, which is a guaranteed way to make it happen, although we can't use that and get the card on turn 1. We'd have to wait until turn 2, use our leader ability, and swap out one of our opponent's cards to get the Mutagenerator. But Avallac'h Sage is a way to make it happen more quickly, potentially. Damsel in Distress is mostly here because presumably our opponent is not going to be able to summon anything out from their deck for the prologue, and then we technically do have some additional knights in our deck, so it is possible for them to trigger the Chapter 1, but none of our knights have grace. They're not getting any value out of Chapter 1, and Chapter 2, I mean, we don't have enough knights for them to realistically ever get that, and more than anything, what this is here for is just to give them a card that is more or less worth 0 points, and then for us, we can use it to summon out Kaedweni Knight, because it gets boosted by 3 when it gets summoned out from our deck. And if this has been the recipient of some deck boosting, which it very well may have been, then that could actually be a pretty huge point slam from that as well. So something that is worth a lot of points to us and 0 points for our opponent, that is exactly what we're looking for in this event. And then Amphibious Assault, just to turn some of those smaller cards into higher point plays, and then assuming we're not playing against Northern Realms, this is another card that's worth 0 points for our opponent. And that's really all there is to it. It is honestly just shocking how effective the Mutagenerator is, because it may not seem all that impressive, spamming as many 4 provision cost cards as we can, but it is remarkably effective, especially once you have a bunch of them on the board. You start playing them in the melee row and boosting all the other ones that are on the board already, and you can turn what would normally be not very powerful cards into quite valuable cards indeed, even from your opponent's starting hand. If you're playing those 4 or 5 provision cost cards, or obviously if they have something really big, then you might as well just play that for whatever value it would normally have, regardless of whether or not it synergizes at all with the Mutagenerator. So initially, I was just testing this deck out. I was curious to see if this would work, and I was absolutely amazed by how effective it was, so I'm curious to see what you guys think of it, but let's go see it in action. Now, once again, because unfortunately I still have a stuffy nose and sore throat, I had to minimize the in-match commentary, otherwise I'd never be able to get this video out. Okay, so starting things off here against Syndicate and one of the best decks in this event with Pirate's Cove. So this is going to be a real test of this deck. So I'm going to show you just how effective this deck truly can be, even with just small 4 or 5 provision cost cards as our primary point scorers, as long as we have that Mutagenerator to help support them. Not to mention, as you can see here, we bricked our starting hand pretty badly. Alright, so next we're going up against Scoia'tael here, and although this isn't really a meta deck per se, their deck did have a lot of the most powerful cards in this event, and in particular several that were worth way more value to them than they were to us, which means that's really difficult for us to match up against that. This time I'm going to show you how to play around structured around the Cintrian Royal Guards. So was our deck still good enough to get the job done? Let's go see. Alright, so this time we're going up against another Syndicate deck, although I'd argue perhaps not quite as powerful of a deck as we saw the first time round. However, the big thing we're going to see this time is that now I will show you just how many points we can get if we get to set up our combos in the ideal way. So there's a look at a ridiculous Northern Realms deck for the new Switcheroo seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.